What a delight to be here with you today. This is Pastor Gabriel Swaggart. I want to just thank every one of you for making this little these daily devotionals, I should say, a part of your day, and we appreciate that so very, very much. Why don't you tell others about these videos? Share them. If you have Twitter, why don't you just forward them? You can share them all over Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, however you want to do it, and I would appreciate that. Any way to get more followers and any way to get these little devotionals out, I really believe that they will be a blessing. And we've already heard from a lot of people that are saying how much that they enjoy these daily videos. And, I appreciate that. Here's what I want you to do before I get into my teaching today. If you have a question regarding anything, why don't you post it? You can see, I'm sure that there's ways to have comments, and if there are any questions, of course I don't look at them right away, but if there are any questions, I'll make sure, and whoever looks at them here, I'll make sure and pass them along to me. That way, one of these days we can answer it. And if you want to do that, it'd be great. I think it'd be a great way to kind of communicate and for you to have maybe some questions answered. Now understand this too. There are a lot of times that questions are answered over the network. Your question that maybe that you have, it has been answered and it will be answered, but if it's not answered right away, so just be patient, and we will try to get to them as soon as possible. I want to start our series again. Start a new series today on the subject of forgiveness. It is a topic that it's very important. It's extremely important, and I feel like there are too many Christians that are harboring unforgiveness toward their fellow brother or sister in the Lord, or really somebody that's not a brother and sister in the Lord. And I want you to know how important that unforgiveness. Let me change that. How devastating that unforgiveness can be. So I want us to deal with the subject this week on forgiveness, and we're going to be going through some scriptures here today or next week, this week, on the subject of forgiveness. And I won't be before you long here today, but just long enough to get this thing started. In Matthew 18, the disciples came to Jesus. Really, it was Peter that came to Jesus, and he asked him the question about forgiveness. And we're going to look at it here today. Matthew 18, verse 21. It says this: "Then came Peter to him," speaking of Christ, "and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Till 7 times? And Jesus answered unto him, I say not unto you until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. Now I'm going to stop there, because he then goes into a parable here that we're going to discuss, Lord willing. But really what this means, he's not really giving a specific number. He's not really giving a specific number, 70 times 7. But really what he's saying is unforgiveness or forgiveness should be constant, that it's innumerable. Let me start off by saying this. When it comes to forgiveness, every one of us at one point in time have harbored unforgiveness. I have. And I know many of you, all of us, have had unforgiveness in our heart. But as I taught you a couple of weeks ago regarding the Lord's Prayer, and Jesus gave that dialogue and that discourse on how we should pray, He gave that one statement: forgive us as we forgive others. That is one of the hardest things to do. I was talking with Torrance just last week when he was here for IYC. We were in the car and we had went out to eat, he and I, along with Keith, and went out to dinner after one night, and we just began to talk about things that are happening in the church. And we got on the subject of unforgiveness. And we begin to talk about how that we have at one time held unforgiveness toward our fellow brother or sister. And you have to understand, ladies and gentlemen, that when you harbor unforgiveness and bitterness towards somebody else, you are cutting off forgiveness from God to you. Now that, you need to know that. When you begin to harbor unforgiveness and bitterness towards somebody else, whomever they may be, you're cutting off your forgiveness, the forgiveness that you need from God. You see, God cannot forgive you until you've forgiven others. That's what His Word tells us. His Word is very clear in the fact that whenever we don't forgive, we cut off forgiveness from God. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as we stay here, let me say this before I close today. And as I said, I'm kind of setting things up for the next few days. It may be hard to forgive. Well, let me change that. It is very hard to forgive. It is very hard at times to forgive someone who has done something to you that is unspeakably wrong. It is very difficult for you, for me, to extend that forgiveness when a person has done something to hurt us. Purposely, when they've done something to physically harm us, to harm our character, to harm our person, to harm our reputation. The easiest thing to do is to defend yourself. But the Bible tells us that vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, that He's going to have the last laugh, that the Lord's going to fight our battles. How many times in Scripture, especially in the Old Testament, where He told a prophet or He told an individual, don't worry, I'll fight your battles. It is replete over and over and over in the Old Testament where the Lord would send an angel to do the work. Stand still. Twice that phrase, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, were uttered. It's not easy for us not to do anything. It is easy for us to go after that person and defend ourselves. But when a person has done you wrong, the worst thing that you can do is harbor unforgiveness. Now, what do I mean by this? When it comes to forgiving someone, it doesn't mean that you have to go out and be their best friend. It doesn't mean that you've got to go out there and be a pal to them. All this means is simply to tell the Lord, Lord, I don't want to harbor any ill will toward our brother or sister. I turn them over to you, and I ask that you would help me to forgive them. Help me not to harbor any ill will toward them. Because when you do that, you're taking yourself out of the equation and you're letting the Lord deal with them. And that's the only thing that you can do, is let the Lord deal with that heart and let the Lord deal with that life. You have to forgive them and show them as much grace, or show them the same grace that God has shown you. We have done so much wrong against God, but yet God forgives us when we ask. And it's up to us, if we want to continue to receive that grace, we want to continue to see that forgiveness, then it's time for us not to release that individual, that hatred, that bitterness, that unforgiveness. Put it into the hands of the Lord and let the Lord handle the situation. Now we're going to pick up where we left off, and we're going to begin and continue our series on the subject of forgiveness. I encourage you, why don't you tell others about this? Send it, forward it, do whatever you want to do with it, and make this thing go round, and make this thing go viral, or whatever they call it today. We love you. God bless you.